Hey there, economic gladiators. Welcome back to Boss Economics World, where we slice through the economic nonsense and serve it up with a side of satire. I'm your host, the Boss Economist, here to expose the clowns, crooks, and chaos in the financial arena. Today, we're diving headfirst into the latest episode of the Trump White House reality show, airing live from Washington, D.C., in July 2025. The main event? A cage match between President Donald Trump and Federal Reserve Chair Jerome Powell, with Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent playing the role of reluctant referee. The stakes? Nothing less than the Fed's independence, the U.S. economy, and, oh yeah, your wallet. So, grab your popcorn, folks, because this is gonna be a wild ride through the economic funhouse. Let's set the scene. On Tuesday, July 22, 2025, Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent stepped into the ring on Fox Business, throwing a lifeline to Fed Chair Jerome Powell, who's been under fire from Trump and his cronies for months. "There's nothing that tells me he should step down right now," Bessent said, referring to Powell's term, which ends in May 2026. "If he wants to see that through, I think he should. If he wants to leave early, I think he should." Wow, Scott, way to take a stand. That's the kind of decisive leadership we expect from the guy in charge of the U.S. Treasury. Basically, do whatever, man, just don't blame me. Meanwhile, Trump, never one to miss a chance to stir the pot, doubled down on his Powell hate fest. On the same day, July 22, 2025, he declared, "Powell has done a bad job, but he's going to be out pretty soon anyway, in 8 months he'll be out." Trump's beef. The Fed's refusal to slash interest rates, which are currently at 4.5% in July 2025, according to the Federal Open Market Committee. Trump wants them 3 percentage points lower, because, nothing screams economic stability like zero interest rates in the middle of a tariff-fueled inflation storm. Oh, and let's not forget the cherry on top, Trump's housing finance chief, Bill Pulte, is throwing around wild accusations of fraud over a $2.5 billion Fed building renovation project, without a shred of evidence. Classy, Bill, real classy. Now, let's zoom out from the political circus and talk about what's really at stake here. This isn't just about Trump's ego or Powell's job security, it's about the independence of the Federal Reserve, one of the cornerstones of the U.S. economy. And folks, if that independence gets torched, we're all in for a world of hurt. First, let's talk about why the Fed's independence matters. The Fed's job is to set monetary policy, interest rates, money supply, you name it, based on data, not political whims. Why? Because if politicians control the Fed, they'll just crank up the money printer to win elections, consequences be damned. Look at history. In the 1970s, political pressure on the Fed led to runaway inflation, peaking at 14.8% in 1980, according to the Bureau of Labor Statistics. It took Paul Volcker's brutal rate hikes, pushing the federal funds rate to 20%, to tame that beast, but not without triggering a recession. Lesson learned, right? Apparently not, if Trump gets his way. Fast forward to 2025. Inflation is already running hot at 3.5% in June, per the BLS, thanks in part to Trump's tariff hikes, which have jacked up import prices by 8% year over year, according to the U.S. Census Bureau. Powell and the Fed have held rates steady at 4.5%, refusing to cut despite Trump's tantrums, because they know lower rates would pour fuel on the inflation fire. But Trump doesn't care about data, he cares about optics. Lower rates mean cheaper borrowing, a juiced-up stock market, and a shiny economic report card for the 2026 midterms. Who cares if it screws over consumers with higher prices? Not Trump, that's for sure. Now, here's where things get juicy. Bessent isn't just defending Powell, he's also throwing shade at the Fed's mission creep. On Monday, July 21, 2025, Bessent called for an internal review of the Fed's non-monetary activities, like that $2.5 billion building renovation project. The Fed has had big mission creep, and that's where a lot of the spending is going, he said on Fox Business. They just print money to spend it. Ooh, burn. And on Tuesday, July 22, 2025, he doubled down, saying Powell has a chance to right-size the Fed's non-monetary functions and secure his legacy. Okay, let's give Bessent a fair shake. Is the Fed really out of control? Since the 2008 financial crisis, the Fed's balance sheet has ballooned from $900 billion to $8 trillion in 2025, per Fed data. And yes, its operating expenses have risen, up 25% since 2010, adjusted for inflation, according to the Government Accountability Office. That $2.5 billion renovation project? It's real, and it sparked outrage among Republicans, who see it as a symbol of bureaucratic bloat. But here's the thing, the Fed's budget isn't taxpayer-funded, it's funded by interest on its securities holdings. So, Bessent's claim that they just print money to spend it is a bit of a stretch. Still, the optics are terrible, especially when the Treasury Department, under Bessent, cut its own expenses by 17% last year, per his own boasts. But let's not kid ourselves, Besant's mission creep critique is also a convenient smokescreen. By focusing on the Fed's non-monetary activities, he's deflecting attention from the real issue, Trump's pressure on monetary policy. And here's where the hypocrisy kicks in. Trump wants the Fed to cut rates to juice the economy, but he's also pushing tariffs that fuel inflation, making rate cuts impossible. It's like trying to lose weight by eating cake and running on a treadmill at the same time. Good luck with that, Don. So, what happens if Trump gets his way and Powell caves, or gets the boot? Let's play out the scenarios, folks, because this is where the rubber meets the road. If Powell stays and the Fed holds rates steady, inflation could stabilize, but at a cost. Higher interest rates mean higher borrowing costs, which could slow economic growth. The Congressional Budget Office projects U.S. GDP growth at just 1.8% in 2025, down from 2.5% in 2024, partly due to the Fed's tight policy. The stock market, already jittery, could take a hit. The S&P 500 is down 5% year-to-date in 2025, per Bloomberg data. And Trump? He'll keep screaming, but the Fed's independence will be preserved, for now. If Powell resigns, or gets fired, which Trump hasn't ruled out, per his July 14 to 20, 2025, comments, the Fed could fall under political control. Imagine a new Fed chair, hand-picked by Trump, slashing rates to 1.5%, as Trump demands. The stock market would soar, borrowing would boom, but inflation? Oh boy. The International Monetary Fund warned in its 2025 World Economic Outlook that aggressive rate cuts in the U.S. could push inflation to 5% by 2026, eroding consumer purchasing power. And don't forget the dollar, a weaker currency, already down 7% against the euro in 2025, per Reuters, would make imports even pricier, fueling the tariff inflation spiral. Long story short. Economic chaos, all to stroke Trump's ego. Now, let's bring in the economic heavyweights. On Tuesday, July 22, 2025, Mohamed El-Erian, former PIMCO CEO, dropped a bombshell on social media, calling for Powell to resign if his objective is to safeguard the Fed's operational autonomy. El-Erian's logic. If Powell steps down, it might protect the Fed from further political meddling. Bold move, MO, but not everyone's buying it. Enter Larry Summers, former Treasury Secretary and Harvard professor, who clapped back on Bloomberg TV's Wall Street Week. The idea that allowing himself to be forced out would somehow make Jay Powell be serving the interests of the independence of the Fed is, I think, very wrong, Summers said. If the Fed chair became a rubber-stamp subject to presidential diktat, I think we would have lost the independence of the Federal Reserve on monetary policy. Boom, mic drop. Summers also backed Besant's mission creep critique, but let's be real, his real beef is with El-Erian's resignation call. And honestly, Summers has a point. If Powell quits, it sets a dangerous precedent. Every future Fed chair will know they serve at the president's pleasure, not the public's. So, what's the takeaway from this economic soap opera? The fight over Powell's job isn't just about personalities, it's about the future of the U.S. economy. If Trump succeeds in bullying the Fed into submission, we're looking at a world of higher inflation, a weaker dollar, and long-term economic instability. If Powell holds firm, the Fed's independence might survive, but at the cost of short-term economic pain. Either way, the real losers are American consumers, who are already getting squeezed by tariffs, inflation, and a slowing economy. And let's not forget the irony, folks. Trump's attacking Powell for not cutting rates, but his own policies, tariffs, tax cuts, deficit spending, are what's making rate cuts impossible. It's like setting your house on fire and then yelling at the fire department for not putting it out fast enough. Classic Trump. That's all for today, economic warriors. What do you think, should Powell stay or go? Will the Fed's independence survive Trump's tantrums? Drop your thoughts in the comments below, and don't forget to like, subscribe, and ring that bell for more economic takedowns. Until next time, this is the Boss Economist, signing off with a smirk and a spreadsheet. See ya.